All right, good evening, everybody. It's now 6 o'clock. We can officially start. The official reason here, the purpose of the hearing is to hear any representation from the public regarding the closure of walkways A, B, and C as per the map that's been distributed in the newspaper and in the mail and such. So it's great to see so many people here tonight. You know, it's good to see even, you know, you care about your community, and that's what we're really, we want to know. The purpose of this event is to inform council. It's been suggested that we close those 3 walkways. Clearly, it'll have an impact on the community, and this is a chance for us to hear from you, the community. I think,
Mayor,
Andre?
Yeah, Mayor Herb, I'd like to declare conflict and then step away.
Sure. All right, thank you. So I'd like to do it just a wee bit differently than some of the hearings that have been done in the past. I wonder, without putting you on the spot and without betraying any confidences, I wonder if those of you that are in favor of closing the walkway, I wonder if you wouldn't mind raising your hands. Okay, good. And those opposed? Great. For courtesy's sake, since it seems to have a real dramatic and immediate impact on the people living right next to the walkway, I wonder if the people who would like it closed would be the first to want to speak. And you could tell us about what's happening in your neighborhood. And if you would, please, give us your name, just so we've got it for the record.
Okay.
So please, come forward.
May I use this mic?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Is it on?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. I live on number 6 Cadmore Crescent, right next to one of the walking paths that connects Cadmore to Trigger Drive.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, sir, your name was?
Christopher. My name is Christopher Afachao. I teach at the high school.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. On behalf of my neighbors, most of whom are behind me right here, we want to thank you all for coming. Tonight, we are here to find a common ground and more so a common sense resolution to a rather long and contentious issue of 3 walking paths that connect Cadmore, Crescent, and Trigger Drive. For your information, we have done our due diligence over a period of time. In response to a request for the paths to be closed, the town sent letters to 112 households on record in the affected areas to vote on. The result showed that the majority were in favor of the closure of the paths. You will never, and never in bold, appreciate the full scope of the problems or issues that we, the property owners, are faced with unless you live immediately adjacent to those paths. Here are but a few examples. 1, vandalism to property. Just take a walk around there, you see things for yourself. Fences broken, windows broken. We hear it at all. We hear it all at the expense of our sleep and peace of mind after a hard day's work. These are not rare occasions. They occur with impunity and regularly, mainly at night and occasionally during the day. We are tired of costly repairs and have given up fixing the damages or putting up a new fence. What is the point when we know it will happen shortly after that? It is not a pretty sight, to say the least. The paths are secluded and out of public view, a perfect rendezvous, so to speak, for nefarious and disgusting activities. They hang out here, argue, fight, drink, do drugs, throw down bottles and garbage. Keeping in mind we have kids living on those properties. We have picked up drug paraphernalia, including needles, long bag, alcoholic containers, broken bottles, and even used condoms. Then there's the puke or pee, where somebody has stopped to make an unthinkable mess, an unpleasant sight for all responsible persons, and terrible for kids we so yearn to protect. We have pictures if you would like to see those. Just call the RCMP, you may say, because there's a problem. Well, if you have ever done that in the middle of the night, you will know that you are not speaking with somebody local from the PAR, and by the time you get done answering all the questions, identify who you are, what the problem is, and where you live, the perpetrators have moved on, and the damage is already done. We don't turn our lights on or ask them to move on for fear of the repercussions in the form of a retaliatory damage, and it's happened before. So we don't call the RCMP unless we believe someone is getting hurt or in trouble. These are on records. They have many of these calls from us over the years. No calls to the RCMP, no statistics. That's the way it works, because they deal with math. And even if an RCMP vehicle makes it over, they better be prepared to get out of their vehicles and try to run the perpetrators down, as the paths provide a very convenient escape route. You can hear people running in the path at night, and you wonder who they are running from, because the patrol car cannot go through that lane. We are concerned about safety. There are no sidewalks on Traeger, and people walk on the road with the traffic to access the paths. Some drivers are too reckless, and some pedestrians have no respect for vehicles. Living adjacent to the paths, we see kids dart out from the path onto the street without looking, especially on the side leading, the side of Cadmore leading to the park, the Rotary Park next door. There have been very close calls whilst I sit in my living room overlooking the road. I have personally, for those who know the area, I had 2 beautiful choke cherries. I had personally taken down a tree closer to the walking path in front of my yard to help motorists avoid fatal accidents. Because when the kids bike, they don't look at the signs. And some of the drivers, when you have a routine, you don't think twice to slow down. So I took out 1 tree closer to the path, just as my way of avoiding a fatality in my neighborhood. For those with dissenting views to the closure, trust us, we see your frustration just as we share your pains. We know the paths were there when we bought our respective properties. We also understand the good intentions of the town putting the walking paths there. However, nobody foresaw the unintended consequences of what we face now. Times have changed in the park. I haven't been here for long. I'm in my 16th year, but I can tell the difference. And I've lived on that property for 14, going to 15 years. So times have changed in the park, presenting us with new challenges, which also call for practical solutions. These are facts we cannot ignore. Some of your concern may be, but not limited to the following. 1, maybe you are concerned over the loss of a shortcut through the neighborhood, and maybe having to walk a little further to get to where you are going. We can understand that. 2, maybe you are also concerned that closure would not eliminate bad behavior, but rather move it somewhere else, specifically the back lane behind the 900 block of Cathedral. We share your concerns there too. We would like to address the concerns. Number one, loss of shortcuts. Our observation is that most people using the path between Traeger Drive and Cadmore are cutting through from or to Campbell. There is no hardship to use instead Campbell and Cathedral sidewalks to get to where they are going. Anyone on the south side of Traeger and Lamb Crescent have little inconvenience to use the same route. There is also the official walking path from Campbell behind Traeger Drive that leads to Dufferin and UCN. This provides access to UCN, the rink, soccer and baseball fields, Margaret Barber, Scott Bateman, and over to Kelsey School using sidewalk pavement all the way with minimal exposure to traffic. And this makes sense. We have monitored the use of the path between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. on school days. Over a period of days, we noted on average 5 to 7 kids walking to school in the morning using the path. Only 2 came from Traeger Drive. The rest were coming onto Traeger from Campbell. We recognize the people who will be affected the most are the people living on the north end of Traeger. But is it really that big of an inconvenience to walk down to Campbell and then to Cathedral, which provides easy access to the rest of the town? We agree with you that a shortcut will be lost. We do. However, the safety of everybody else far outweighs the inconvenience in walking just a couple of yards extra. For that reason, we do not believe keeping the paths open to provide a perceived convenience for foot traffic from Campbell or the people living in the south end of town is justifiable. The biggest inconvenience will be those of us who are even living right next to it, because I will have to go a longer distance just to say hi to my neighbors. Anyway, moving the problem elsewhere. There's no proof the problems experienced on the footpaths will move elsewhere. They may, or again, they may not. So we are just conjecturing here. Should this happen, we will work with you in the spirit of good neighborliness to resolve it, because that's what problems are for. We have to solve them. Sidewalks on Cathedral offer open view to the public. Kids are safer, and so will it be for all right down to Margaret Barber, with street lights illuminating them all the way. Cars passing by, RCMPs included. On another note, the back lane is easily accessible to RCMP patrol vehicle, whereas the same cannot be said about the walking paths by our properties. Secondly, the back lane also provides access to people to their garages or back property and for garbage pickup and other traffic. The footpath is just that, it's just a footpath. That is providing a shortcut through a neighborhood. It is not a necessary piece of the town's infrastructure. Our solution is to close the paths and see what happens next. Then we will have material to work with. We'll come back together and see how best we can solve this issue in the best interest of the community as a whole. Thank you for listening.
Does council have any questions of Christopher? Chris, I know exactly where you live. Have you found the problem to have gotten worse over time, over the 15 years, or about the same, or does it fluctuate?
It's gotten worse.
It's gotten worse, you feel?
It's gotten worse.
Yeah. More so in the summer, I'm guessing?
It's year-round,
Yeah.
but more so in winter because they know we cannot easily get out and give them a chase, and we dare not.
And I understand your frustration with the RCMP. We had asked him about this just a couple of weeks ago at one of our meetings, and he said something to the effect that the walking paths weren't a problem, is what the RCMP had said.
Okay, I'll be very specific here. Do any of these RCMP members who gave you this report live adjacent to that walking path?
I'm sorry, I don't know where he lives.
Okay,
Yeah,
I can assure you that they don't live next to it. So they won't appreciate the extent of what we go through at night when these things are happening. I do understand their desire to help us keep us safe and patrol the area, but they don't live next to it. So it is very difficult to perceive the extent of panic we live in.
Okay, thank you.
Do you call the police anymore, or have you kind of given up on that?
We've given up because we have reason to.
That could be why they don't have the statistics.
Is that because of lack of them showing up? Is that because of lack of the RCMP actually showing up?
They show up, but it is too late.
Okay.
So if there's no path there, we don't have to worry about that. They do show up. We appreciate that. But they show up to pick up reports after the fact.
Anything else, sir?
I don't know if my colleagues in the neighborhood have some comments to make to this one.
I'll add some comments when he's finished.
I'm done.
You're done? All
Yes,
right.
I am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, you go first.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Zaharia, and I live at 18 Cudmore Crescent. We purchased our home about 12 years ago. We bought it because we loved the quiet neighborhood and we loved the home. Since then, we have dealt with many issues from that walkthrough, including locked vehicles being broken into, flattened tires, broken windows, broken fence boards, stolen gas, and things being thrown over the fence resulting in emergency visits to the vet. Many times, we are woken up in the middle of the night from intoxicated people who are yelling and fighting. I've been in my home and had people try turning the doorknob to get in. I've had someone show up in the middle of the night on my doorstep, pounding on my front door when my husband's at work and I'm home alone. My husband is the only person who maintains this walkthrough. He cuts and cleans the weeds, cleans up the excessive amount of garbage consisting of broken glass, used tampons, condoms, diapers, sometimes a needle, and even underwear. The light rarely is working in this walkthrough, and I don't know how anyone would consider this a safe area for children. Society today is not the way it was 30 years ago when those walkthroughs were made. I find it hard to believe that kids and adults can't take one of 3 other options available to get to school and work. They can take the rotary walking path, they can take the back alley, and they can take the main street of Cathedral, which would be a lot safer for kids. We are asking the town to close the 3 walkthroughs that lead from Traeger Drive to Cudmore Crescent.
Any questions for Cheryl, guys? Cheryl, you touched on the light rarely works.
Yeah.
When you say rarely, not very often, once in a while?
I think that, the light bulb has been replaced about a year ago, but other than that, it didn't work for at least 4 years.
Is it working now?
It's working
It's
right
working
now.
Okay.
Yeah. At least until somebody smashes it.
Any questions of Cheryl, anybody? No? Okay. Is there any, Joyce, you're
Yeah,
up?
right.
Okay.
My name is Joyce Tote, and I live at 97 Traeger Drive, right beside the walking path, and I am in favor of closing the paths. My husband and I have lived there going on 20 years, and the problems associated with the walking paths have been coming up over and over and over again over the years with no solutions. And if we keep doing the same thing, we're going to just keep getting the same results. So I think it's time to try to make a change. And we were talking about lights along the paths, and when they're there, they're great, but when they're not working, it's not so great. And I can tell you the lights right beside our path are not working right now. And when they were working, they were on a rotational basis. So you could be walking and you'd be halfway through the path and it goes completely dark. And you're feeling your way trying to find where you are depending on the night lights in the sky. The paths are narrow, they're secluded, they're out of sight, and especially in the summertime, they are very private. All the things that are conducive to allowing bad behavior. And we all know that when you think no one can see you, you're going to do things that you're going to do that you wouldn't do otherwise. When you have privacy, you're more relaxed to do what you wouldn't do otherwise. And we do see people's behavior change when they hit the privacy of the path and they believe that they are out of sight, because they are to most of the people in our area. People don't see them there. We hear them and we see them. And when they emerge back out onto the street, they know they can be seen, their behavior changes, and they move on. Our solution is to get rid of the privacy of the paths and move the foot traffic out into the open. Push people to use Cathedral Sidewalk out in the open where they can be seen the full length of Cathedral in a well-lit area by residents and cars passing by, RCMP included. And as I may be repeating some of what Chris has said, but Cathedral Sidewalk is also the safest place, especially for children to walk for the exact same reasons. It's better than walking in the midst of the traffic down Traeger Drive to get to Cathedral. And in wintertime, if you're traveling through there, you'll see that the streets are narrowing. There's cars parked all along the way. And then you've got pedestrians that are also trying to move through that same area. And the same would go for using the back lane of Cathedral. It's much more open and in view and accessible by RCMP. And to action issues on the walking path, they must get out of their vehicles and give chase on foot, and people know that. And you referenced earlier that the RCMP didn't see it as much of a problem. That's because they're not called there. They don't see it as a problem because they're not going there to answer calls, because we have given up on making calls to the RCMP. So I can see where they would say they don't see it as an issue. But I have observed in the past where, in the past, where RCMP have had to get out on foot, and I remember witnessing one arrest that went down in the walking path. And as Chris talked about, will the unwanted behaviors just move from the path over to Cathedral or the back lane? And as he said, maybe, but then again, there's no proof of that, it's just speculation. The only thing that I know for a fact is that the unwanted behavior in our neighborhood is mostly isolated to the path, and the fact that very few people in our area are aware of our problems supports that. As Chris said earlier, unless you live immediately adjacent to the paths, you are not aware of the full scope of the problems or issues that we, the property owners, are faced with. We, in fact, just made a report yesterday to the RCMP because boards were ripped off our fence. It was sometime early yesterday morning, and it left a hole in our fence, which my husband fixed actually just before we came here. So I made sure that I did report that to the RCMP because we do understand that we do have to get the stats in, so that in future we will be calling for everything that happens on the path and get those stats in. And we are aware that the people from Traeger that do use the path, us included, will be inconvenienced to varying extents and have to walk some yards farther, but we see no other solution. The only other option that we can maybe suggest is for the town to take ownership of the fences and for the taxpayers to dig deeper into their pockets and to share not only the convenience, but also the cost of that convenience. Thank you.
Any questions for Joyce? When you talk about the privacy, you're referring to the fences and such. It's not like there's
When you come down Traeger and you go around the
Yeah,
curve there,
yeah.
you don't see down the path until you're right beside it. And then in the summertime especially, we've got trees in our backyards, it's grown over. When you're in there, you just feel like you're in your own little oasis.
Okay. The lights don't work?
They're not working
There's two lights
right.
on that one, I think, isn't there? Is there two?
Pardon?
Is there one or two lights on that path?
There's just one, and
There's
it's not
one?
working right now, it's
Just the one?
smashed.
And it's about midways?
Yes.
It's about midways.
And like I said, when it did work, it was on a rotational basis, so it come on, go off, come on, go off.
Okay.
And the other thing I would say is that with the RCMP, people that are in the path know that the RCMP have to get out of their vehicles and give them a foot chase if they did come there. So that's another incentive, because if they come in this way, they'll just go that way, vice versa.
And the light's not working now?
That's correct.
And how long has it not been working, Joyce?
For a few months now.
A few months? Have you called the town?
I called the town, yes. Actually, no, I emailed Sam,
You emailed Sam?
and he said he would pass it on to the hydro.
Does Hydro service those lights?
I'm assuming so.
Okay, I'll find out. Okay, thank you.
That's good?
Is there anyone else in your group that has anything just yet? No? Okay.
Hello, I'm Andrew Forward, 257 Traeger Drive, and I just wanted to voice my support for the closure of all of the walkways as was identified in the hearing notice document. I support all of the things that Chris and Joyce and Cheryl have identified. Specifically, though, I want to point out that I don't live adjacent to one of those walkways that are in question. I do have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old daughter, and our family will be walking further if those closures occur. And I consider that to be far safer than sending them down those walkways at this point in time based on the current usage of those walkways by a lot of people that are not school children in the middle of the day. And with respect to I just wanted to say that with respect to the RCMP and whether or not this was identified to them as a concern or whether or not they, interpret it as such, it's not hard to see that the data wouldn't support it from an RCMP perspective. I mean, the frustration in general with anybody in the community that's having to deal with minor offenses is such that if you make a phone call once, you probably don't make a phone call again for things like, kind of disorderly conduct at night, or if somebody's hooting and hollering or there's a party going on, because it's simply not a priority for the RCMP. That doesn't mean it's not important to them. It's just that they are dealing with a lot of other higher priority stuff, and I understand that, and so I wouldn't want a lack of data from the RCMP to necessarily be a decision factor on whether or not closure of these walkways would provide some kind of beneficial, kind of addressment of the issue at hand through community design. I mean, these subdivisions were laid out in the 70s. The society was different in the 70s. There was, my wife has lived on Traeger Drive. She grew up on Traeger Drive, and there were block parties, and there was a neighborhood community that existed. That tends not to exist these days in general in our communities, and so the fabric and the relationship of the community is different. So I think there's an opportunity here to try something that can allow for the management of an issue by community design. And if community design incorporates concerns around crime and concerns around safety, then I think that you would arrive at a place where you would say it makes sense to try and close these walkways and see what happens. Could be that 2 years from now they're open again because it turns out that was the wrong thing to do. But I think doing nothing is not the best option. I don't think you get any more information by doing nothing. So I support those closures, and I hope that council will as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions for Andrew? No? Thanks, Andrew. Okay. The people who were in favor of closing it, I wouldn't mind hearing from some of you now, please. Who's first? Glenn? Come on up.
My name's Glenn Yanchicki. I live at 911 Cathedral Avenue. Herb, you and I have been over this before. Obviously, a lot of you have seen my Facebook post, and that's what I have here to go over. I've lived on the east side of 900 block of Cathedral Avenue for about 35 years. It seems that almost every time a new mayor and council are put in place, the issue of closing the walking paths arises. For reasons in the past, the closure has been rejected. I can understand the frustration of the people living along these walking paths, as I also have a large amount of foot traffic in my back lane excuse me, and my front street. I too have experienced theft and vandalism to my property and vehicles, close to $10,000 worth. I don't really know, but I would think that most of their concerns is damage and graffiti on their fences, as well as that maybe garbage thrown over their fences into their yards. I believe that if the walking paths are closed, a lot of that will come to my area, more so than it is already. I also encounter frequent foot traffic through my yard of people going from the back lane to the front street or the reverse. I'm quite sure that these people do not have to deal with this yet, but if the paths are closed, I would expect this will happen as people will find a way to be cutting through their yards. When this issue was brought forward before in April of 2009, the RCMP advised more lighting be installed, cameras, and police control. Did all of this ever happen? So now if the paths are closed, where are you going to move them to? Where are most of the people going to be walking? I would think the next route would be the back lane of the 900 block of Cathedral Avenue. So what you would be doing is not eliminating the vandalism, but simply moving it to a different area than where it is now. If you close the walking paths because of problems there, now the problem moves to my back lane. Will you close my back lane to move the problem from there? I think not. My point is that the issues will not go away. They will just be moved. Vandalism is everywhere. Are you going to close all of the sidewalks where there is an issue? I once took the opportunity to observe people using the walking path that goes from Traeger Drive to Cudmore and then to the playground. It was a school day. It was +5 Celsius. The time was 3:45 to 4:30. After 45 minutes, I observed 43 people make use of the walking paths, of which 4 were adults, and I would assume 4 middle school or high school age. The rest, in my opinion, were young elementary student age. If these students were walking home for lunch, that's over 140 times that this path is used by young people in one day. Even if they don't return home for lunch, that number is still 70 times. At 7 p.m., I returned to the same area that day and observed 25 people using the path in 1 hour. The weather was cool and windy. I also have to think that the numbers would be much higher during warm, sunny days. The percentage of vandals using the paths is probably very low compared to the many other people who have a good use for the paths. I spoke with a few people in the area, and they said their children not only use the paths to go to school, but also to the rink, the pool, baseball diamonds, soccer fields, and they said it wouldn't be fair. It's not their kids doing the vandalism. As I earlier stated, I've lived on Cathedral for over 30 years, along with my neighbors on either side of me. I raised my children there as they did. We all know what the traffic is like on that street. We didn't allow our children to play on the front yard because of the amount of speeding cars. In fact, there was one occasion when a speeding van lost control, drove across my neighbor's front lawn to the north of me, then across my yard, and ended up finally stopping on my neighbor to the south of me on his front yard. We all talked about it later, how fortunate we were that none of our children or anyone else happened to be on that part of the street or the sidewalk at that time. There's many instances on that street when people are driving, there's like no speed limit on that street. Many times, you'll be lucky to find a car that is going the speed limit. The point that I'm making here is that safety for all the people, mostly the children who use those paths. For a child walking to school who lives in the north end of Traeger would have to go all the way to Campbell Drive, then across to Cathedral and down Cathedral where all the traffic is. This also includes many people walking from Traeger, Lamb, Campbell, many people in the 3 apartment buildings, as well as people living in the south end of that area of town. In closing, I'd like to ask, are you going to close the paths to satisfy about a dozen homeowners when it affects hundreds of people. Those walking paths were there when they bought their homes. They were not put there after. Closing the paths will only move the problems and not stop them. When the problem moves to my back lane, I will be requesting that you close it also. Is this the way that the town is going to resolve an undesirable situation of where there are problems of people frequenting? If this is the case, should we be expecting the downtown areas to be closed next?
Any questions for Glenn? Glenn, your back lane, is it lit?
No.
No lights in your back?
There's one light there that it's owned by a private
One
citizen,
yard light, okay? But no, there's no back lane.
Nothing.
lights, yeah?
other than motion lights that people unscrew the bulbs in.
Okay. Any questions for Glenn? No? All right, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else from, oh, come on up, sir.
Jim Metcalf, 210 Traeger Drive, and I'm not in favor of closing any of the paths. We've lived on Traeger Drive for the last 35 years. We have lived there when those paths were going over to a vacant lot that was safe for a school to be built there. And that was prior to the Cudmore and Harvey subdivision being even thought of. Seems like the pathways are attacked each time we have a new mayor or a change in council or ownership of the homes along the paths in the last few years. I understand that some of the people along the pathways have frustrations, as have their fences and property vandalized, but they have to think about all the others in the same area who have had eggs thrown at their houses, rocks at their windows, and people trying to climb over their fences and open gates to get into their backyards. We've had that happen in our own yard, and we're 4 houses away from the walkthrough. We have asked for more lighting in the paths over the years and have received it, although it probably could be a lot brighter, which would even deter more people from hanging out in that area. There are lots of people that use these pathways to get to school, work, or sporting activities, or to visit their friends who live beyond the 2 streets. Our children have used that pathway when they were in school, and we encourage the grandchildren to use these paths rather than the bike path beyond Traeger Drive, as it seems to be a safer route. Safer route meaning many strangers and animals along the path. It is a long way around for young children to go from the north side of Traeger to the south side, and then having to go down the busy, not so always dry street of Campbell Drive in the spring and down the busy Cathedral Drive. People in apartment buildings on Campbell Drive and other areas beyond walk down and around these pathways. There are lots of people in town and the area who do not have vehicles and have to walk. The paths have been there long before development in the Cudmore area. People buying and living in these areas should realize that the pathways could be a high-traffic area for people and children walking to and from wherever. We've had people in our own front yard partying and loud parties next door or streets over. And of course, you will hear all these noises at night. But I would not say that the noise comes from a pathway which we live only 3 doors away from. We are all neighbors and do not need rifts in our friendship. We would suggest that cameras could be installed and some lighting on the ends of the homes along the paths could help deter the situation. These vandalizers need to be caught, and we all can help to do this by trying to identify the persons and turn over to the proper authority. Better still, more complaining people could be more proactive and become citizens on patrol and be more active in the town cleanup and the town of the Paw, keep these pathways clean of snow also. Closing the path walkways does more harm to adults and children trying to walk to school and a shorter way. Those wanting the walkways closed are being selfish, and they're disrespectful to their neighbors. All they want is an extra place to park their boats, campers, and other vehicles. We cannot give in to vandalism, because otherwise we have everything closed around town, and we all become victims. Vandalism is seen all over town. That is why we're very against the closing of any of the walkways. In closing, please, Mr. Mayor and Town Council, think of those you are satisfying. 8 householders who live right along the pathways on Traeger Drive and Campbell Drive. The rest of the people on Traeger Drive, Campbell Drive, Lamb Crescent, apartment dwellers, and those living in the trailer park on the south side of town that walk this way. We all pay taxes, and do think it is not fair that you even think of having to cave into the demands of the many of the 8 households along the pathway. I have walked through that pathway probably a minimum of 2,000 times in all hours of the day and night, and I have yet to meet a person on that pathway that coming one way or the other, and I've walked through there day and night. So I don't know where the vandalism is coming from, because there's never been anybody there when I've walked through it. That's my presentation.
Any questions for Jim? No? Okay, well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Must be somebody else who wants to speak. Oh, come on up, sir. Oh, ladies first, I guess. Go ahead, Deb.
Hi, my name is Debbie Howell. I live at 221 Traeger. I've lived there since July of 1988. When we first moved into our home, the walkways were all there, including the one going to the walking path that was non-existent at that time. Since I moved there, the walking path behind my house, the rotary path, was established. Behind there's lots of danger. There's parties, people walking, partying, glass being broken. So I guess the next step would be, once the walkways, if they were to be closed and the traffic moves behind my house, I will be putting in a request to have the walking path closed, which seems unrealistic. I don't want the walkways closed, not for my favor, because I don't walk. I think I've used them 5 times. I choose not to walk. I'm here for the people that don't have a voice. I'm here for the people that don't have a vehicle to get here, to give their voice. We can't just move the problem. I believe that if there is an issue, it's up to the town to fix the problem. Whether you provide lighting, cameras, pay for more RCMP to have foot traffic, COPP, you know, it's not up to the 8 households that only 5 here are represented at the time, get a voice to close. They have a voice. I'm not saying they don't. But I think it's unrealistic to close the walkways. For many reasons that Glenn stated, for many reasons that Mr. Metcalf stated, you know, it's the people that we're here for, not just the 8 households. It's the children that have to walk, that have no rides, that have single-parent families that don't, are at work and can't take their children to school, ones that don't look after the children properly and don't get up in time to take their kids to school, that to catch the bus, they have to walk. People going to UCN, Scott Bateman, MBCI, the rink, all those locations, and not only going there, coming back. It's unrealistic to close all the walkways. That's all I have to say.
Any questions for Deb? Oh, okay, go ahead, Karen.
I have a question. It's not necessarily just directed to you. It could be for whoever else who spoke in keeping them open. So I don't know, because I haven't paid attention to people's fences. So on the west and the east side of Traeger Drive, is there access for the people who live in those houses to go through their back gate and get to The back lane?
I
or
could go
to
through
get
my house to get to the walking path. But I don't know about the rest of the people. The ones that live on Traeger, they have backyards. I'm sure they can get into the back lanes, but the back lanes are more dangerous than the walkways, as far as I'm concerned. The kids can climb over people's fences and cut through those houses to get through to Cathedral if they chose to. We don't want them climbing the fences and into our yard. And our fence behind, I forgot to mention too, is damaged. The Rotary have sprayed or painted over the words that have been put on there on several occasions. Our fence has been damaged, our property has been damaged. We get garbage from the path thrown into our yard. We have parties on the street, down the street. We have people walking down Traeger that are drunk. It's what it is. You know, you have to learn to deal with it, and the RCMP have to be involved. And you as a community and community members have to take that time to help the community, not just close it and move it. You know, you walk down Edwards in the back lane, well, not at night for sure, even during the day I wouldn't even walk down there because of the garbage and stuff down there. It's the same difference. You're going to close the back lanes. You're going to close the back lanes to La Rose. It's disgusting. You're going to close the back lane to many home areas. They all have problems, and it becomes the community's problems, and therefore it becomes your problem to find solutions to deal with it, not just to put a Band-Aid on it. A Band-Aid is not going to help the solution, or the problem, I should say.
My question was to clarify, say somebody who lived at the top west end, if their child could go out their backyard onto the back lane as opposed to walking all the way down Traeger and then down Campbell to get to Cathedral, if they could just go to that back lane and cut up.
So you're talking the corner of Campbell and Traeger.
Well, it'd be the back lane of the 900th block at Cathedral on the west side of Traeger. If that child, if there was a child, because I don't know if a child lives in that house, like close to the north end, if they could just go out their back lane and have 2 houses to go down, and then they would be like on Cathedral, as opposed to walking all the way down Traeger and then Campbell and up to Cathedral.
Sure.
I'm just trying to make
Yeah,
sense
they
of that.
probably could if
those-
they had a
those homes had
backyard and
back
a gate,
access.
yeah.
Okay.
But then we're not just talking about the ones on the west side. We've got the ones on the east side.
Right, and then there would, so if there was back access to their fences as well, then
There
they
is
could
to
be
the walking
directly
path,
onto the walking path.
But I wouldn't allow my kids under a certain age to walk down the walking path. You know, if they're going to the rink or they're going to school early in the morning when it's still dark out, or they're coming home after baseball or after basketball practice, my children are older now, but I wouldn't allow them to walk down the walking path.
Thank you.
There's been lots of incidents that have happened there too.
Bill, you had a question?
You mentioned citizens on the COPP. Are they there regularly, or are they, like, I don't know where they patrol in the town, I'm sorry.
I have no idea where they are. I think they keep their stuff incognito so that people don't see them.
But I know they do keep records of wherever, and I would imagine they pass that on to whoever. But I just don't, like, I live on Cathedral, I just don't see them over in our part of town. So I
I don't
just
see them
wondered
in our
if
part of
they.
the town either. I think they drive,
Oh, okay.
but they were out walking during Halloween.
Yeah, well, there's lots of other people. Yeah, I didn't know where if you had seen them actually patrolling through the area.
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sir?
I'm not neatly prepared to speech, I'm sorry, I'm barely literate. But I do have a few comments, and I've changed my mind since I got here, was listening.
Sir,
I wanted to say that I'm totally in favor of keeping them open.
Sir, could
And
I,
I love
could I,
the
could I,
path.
excuse, could we get your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, I
That's
told myself
okay.
to say that. Stephen Mason, I live on 23 Traeger for the last 6 years.
Thank you.
And before that, I came from 20 miles out in the valley, so this whole thing is new. But I do think the paths are wonderful, and wonderful foresight putting them in. But I think listening to people, that these people have completely legit complaints. I live almost at the south end of Traeger, and I get massive amounts of cursing and swearing and drunken fighting on my street. I've had a lot of theft, a lot of vandalism, some of it from the back alley. But when I sit on my deck, I also hear probably more swearing and drinking and yelling and fighting on Cathedral. So it's not just on that street. I don't know if it's going to help anybody except make it harder for those in Cathedral if we close them. I do have sympathy for those that walk, though. My kids have used it. I have 2 grandchildren. I hope to use them. We can, at our end, they can go down the back alley or up to Cathedral, over to Cathedral, just as easily to go to school. I have a son right now, one that walks to high school and one that goes to KCC, or, sorry, I'm dating, UCN, and he obviously uses one of the paths. And I used to use one of the paths over on the other, further south in town years ago, and it saved me a long walk, and I was very grateful for it. But they too had problems then, there too. And I don't think the problems are going to go away. They have legit complaints. I don't know if it's just moving the problems somewhere else. I guess it really is. But I think the convenience, I think the community spirit of having those paths is worth trying to keep them open. And I'm not going to pick on the town here, but I do think, though, then that the only way that can be done and make people happy is that a lot of money probably, or certainly a lot of effort, be put into the paths if they're going to be kept open, whether it be lighting, decent fencing. I think it could be a workable solution, and maybe we could all be happy then. And I think it might be worth a try. Or we can compromise and close one and leave one open and try that. I don't know. But I think instead of dissing each other for this and that, each other that, no, you're wrong, I'm right. No, maybe we're all right and we just need to try and work together. On saying that, I don't live beside a path. I'm far from it. I can have no part in doing anything for it, or patrolling it or anything. And I have not had any problems that they have because of it. But I do know that it's a real problem. And I do hope we can fix it, preferably in favor of keeping them open. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Bob? Sure.
Bob Uckman, 887 Trimoden, so I'm definitely not directly involved. But I'd like to make a few points just as a concerned longtime resident of the town. And many of my points are also been well covered already, and both sides of the story really have presented good facts. But and I'm only going to speak about B and C, just those two, not A.
Oh, okay.
But walkways like this are pretty standard features in any residential development such as that, where there's not the old form or a grid system. And I believe they're built in there to provide more reasonable, shorter, better access to public places, especially schools, but all kinds of public places, and even businesses. And Google Maps shows about 60 buildings in Traeger Drive, Lamb Crescent. So I'm going to suggest that about 40 of them could be negatively affected if those two walkways were closed. I'm not counting the ones close to Campbell Drive or the ones that back onto the walking path, because those have other ways to go. But if they were closed, some kids could end up walking an extra 400 meters to go to school. And in weather like we've just been having, that's kind of tough. I fully appreciate the concerns being expressed by those, particularly the 8 families that are obviously directly affected. But as has been already stated, vandalism, graffiti is a standard situation across the town. Back lanes are no different, except back lanes are wider, but they suffer the same damage. I just think it's somehow not right. The other thing I should mention, I have no idea how many kids are there now walking to school, but looking at the pathways themselves, they're well-traveled by the beaten-down snow. And we shouldn't only look at the population makeup today, you know, whether there's 7 kids or 42 or whatever. The same features would apply in the future as far as access, particularly for kids to school and so on. So I think the future must be looked at as well. And it just doesn't strike me right that, let's say there's, well, there are definitely going to be some kids there, that people that are absolutely not to blame for anything would be penalized through closure for the idiocy of some other people. And I'm not proposing closure or opening it. I just hope some of these things would be well considered when you're making your decision. But that's about all I had to say.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Bob? No? Anybody else wish to speak to us at this moment?
We need some ladies.
Okay, come on up.
There's a seat there for you. Anyway, we've been living about close to 30 years in the Palm. We lived in Toronto too. And my name is Lily Kamizis. And we have been living directly by the walkway. And we saw everything. When we first moved, we had at least 4 or 5 bicycles stolen. And so it's different. You really see what's going on. For instance, middle of the night, people talking loud and waking us up from our sleep. This is just unbelievable, and the drinking and the problem. Usually our daughter from Calgary comes here every time. She has to phone the police because people are fighting, and they fight with knives. We've seen it all, you know, in front of our house. And many sleeps have been robbed. Now, I think it's different when you live further away from the walkway. When you live directly, you see everything. Right, honey? Come here. You can talk to
You have to be obedient.
Come on, honey, sit down.
Yeah, sit down. And you got to have a sense of humor. We're active with the children. We do supply teaching. And our son lives here. Our daughters are all over the place. And we're expecting our 2nd grandchild. So life is exciting. I got my babysitting job back, looking after grandchildren. Anyway, so, yeah, do you want, here, you can talk too.
Yeah, I can only support that. We had all kinds of things. Lily mentioned already the stealing of bikes. Then last year, the front window of the car in the driveway was smashed, and eggs on the house, windows smashed, and
rocks,
yeah, all kinds of damage. That is not fun. I have a question for all those who are in favor not to close the walkways. Obviously, we have a problem here. Not just one, but a whole bag full of problems. What are your suggestions, solutions to tackle these problems? If we go one way or the other, but don't do anything about the problems itself, it's right. They might move somewhere else and it gets worse or stays the same. So can we think about any solutions, one way or the other, to tackle these problems? That's my question to all those who are in favor not closing the walkways.
All righty. Any questions right now? No? Okay, well, congratulations on the pending grandchild. Thank you for speaking.
It's coming in June.
Good for you.
November 6th.
There you go. Thank you, honey. Anybody else? No, come on up.
Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. My name is Roland Lassan. I live at Cathedral Apartments. I am not a property owner.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me? How about now?
No, because that doesn't bring it into here. No, just talk to them, don't worry about the mic. Don't worry about the mic.
Okay. I am in favor of keeping the paths open. I did not prepare a speech. It's a great turnout, by the way. I wasn't expecting that. Sorry. I'm in favor of keeping the paths open. Just a couple points. It's nice to have infrastructure that is just for pedestrians. I lived in Wood Manor from 2010 to 2012, and I walked that path every day. And it was just nice to have a path that wasn't along Cathedral, where people drive really fast. And, you know, it's nice to have something that's dedicated just for pedestrians. It's unfortunate to see how run down that path is. It's poorly maintained, it's poorly lit. It isn't treated as a serious piece of infrastructure like streets are, or sidewalks. It's just sort of an afterthought. Regarding vandalism and loitering in the area, I want to remind everyone here that the Bear Clan Patrol is going to be active in town in the next couple of months, and that's something that is right up their alley. That's something that they would address, regular patrols and forwarding things to the police. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, I really can't think of what else to say. That's about it.
Thank you, Roland. Any questions of Roland? No? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? No? Okay. So I got a few things. So I lived at, many of you may know this, or you may remember, I lived at 8 Cudmore for close to 10 years. I completely understand where you're coming from. The tipping point for me personally and Kathy, when we moved, she was out for her morning constitutional one morning and there was some noise in the garage. And she thought it was one of the boys sneaking home, and it wasn't. And there was some kid come out of the garage with a couple of my articles, and she screamed, and I grabbed a golf club. And I chased the little brat down the walking path, but he was faster than me, right? So he got away. It was shortly after that that we moved over to Paul, because I kind of had enough too, right? So I completely understand where you're coming from. I do get it. One of the dangers when you're elected is you all of a sudden think you're the smartest guy in the room, and I know from personal experience that I'm not. And when I look around here, I see some smart people here. But I have an idea, right? Because I feel that the town of The Pas has let you down. Not just the people at the walking path, but the residents in the neighborhood as well. You know, I think that we could have done more, and I think we have let you down. I'm wondering, I've got an idea, right? I'm wondering if 2 or 3 people who are in favor of keeping the path open and 2 or 3 people who are in favor of closing the path, I wonder if you would come together and we could form a little bit of a working group with council and try to come up with a solution. The solution might be to close it. The solution might be to open it. The solution might be to hold the town of The Pas accountable and take care of it. But I'm wondering if we could have a collective meeting with us and try to come up with an idea before we're forced to try to be the smartest people in the room, which sometimes we're not. Would you folks be in favor of that? Could I count on you? Because I do believe you all just want to make our town better. Glenn?
I won't commit to anything that, I wasn't elected to do the job.
I know what you're getting at, right? No, I get it, right? But I just want to know if people are willing to work together a little bit, one more time before we do this.
Because when I approached this
Way
many
back.
years ago,
Yeah.
the RCMP had suggested lighting that was half-assed done, so to speak.
Yeah, half-assed.
Yeah.
And RCMP patrols, I mean, we all know how they work. It's no secret.
Yep.
And cameras were also suggested at that time. And had any cameras ever been installed?
No.
Anybody who lives there?
No.
You know, so I mean,
Okay.
the suggestions that were there many years ago, they weren't even followed up on.
So what if we got together one night for coffee, and I'll buy, and we sit down and have this discussion? 5 or 6 of us, and let's just, Deb, I see you nodding your hair.
Let's have a latte.
Latte? I'll get a list, okay? So are you guys open to the idea?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have everybody's email addresses? Okay, well, I wonder if the, let's just say the no side, if the no side would give us, say, three email addresses, and the yes side would give us 3 of theirs. And then we'll contact you, and we will have a meeting and a discussion and see if we can come up with a solution. You guys are good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we'll do then is we'll formally call the meeting, we'll adjourn it, but as you leave, if you could come and see Jen and Randy here before we start our council meeting, we'll get some email addresses. Okay? I promise you, we're gonna come up with a solution, one way or the other. We won't pass this off. Okay? Okay, Jen? Okay, Jen's ready for you. Perfect. Absolutely, put your name on the list.